Hey guys,
Hello.
how are you today?
Really happy to be here. Thank you for wanting to talk to us.
Oh my God, I am so in love with Cryptozoo. This is an allegoric, psychedelic, kaleidoscopic, hallucinogenic wonder.
Woo!
I was taken right back to my youth in the 1960s, like the summer of '69, with the messaging, with the animation. This is a winner on every level, guys.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for saying that. That's beautiful.
This is the way to start an interview. Get us all nice and buttered up.
I have to ask, what came first with Cryptozoo? This is a case of, the chicken and egg dilemma. Does the animation come first? Does the story come first? Where do your creative minds meld to give birth to something like this?
Well, I think the first idea was drawing as our, only way of depicting imaginary beings. They can't be photographed. So, drawing is kind of a direct circuit to the imagination and the imaginary world. So that was a key component. I had seen an early Winsor McCay short called The Centaurs from 1921, and that has a great kind of adult sexiness of these kind of half-nude centaurs in a dark forest. And around when I saw that, it was also when Jane had an all-women's Dungeons and Dragons group in Brooklyn. And so I wanted to write something that I think she would enjoy participating in. And she painted most of the cryptids in the movie. So those were two of the very first things that kind of kicked it off.
Mm-hmm. Where did this story and its messaging, because the messaging of peace and love, all living things, it is something that is so needed today, and it's something we haven't really seen in a long time be brought to life on screen, be it live action or animated. So I'm curious about how the story developed once Jane got her little paintbrushes and pen and inks going on these cryptids.
Well, around the same time that Jane was D&Ding and I was kind of looking at this animation and mythological beings, I was also had a fellowship.
I wasn't just playing D&D. I was also finishing the previous movie. Let's just clarify.
I wasn't sitting at home playing D&D all day.
No, I wish I had been.
I had a fellowship at the New York Public Library, and one of the other fellows there was researching countercultural newspapers of the 1960s. And so he had them in his office, and the New York Public Library had this incredible archive of them. So it would be like 1967 pre-weekly paper in Brazil, and that same week in Chicago, and they all had this kind of incredible optimism and a similar kind of almost fantasy art aesthetic across them. So I think that was like creating a collage of characters who would all have a different relationship with the Cryptozoo kind of became the center of the script. And then fitting that into, an exciting hour-and-a-half long spectacle movie was the goal.
Spectacle is the right word. This is a visual spectacle, Dash, that I am so in love with. But, I love the story in that you give all these different perspectives. We see the militarism aspect of it. We see the rationale of protecting the cryptids. We see, okay, we got to turn it into a Disneyland kind of thing to make money in order to keep protecting this. You give us all sides for objectivity to step in, for everybody to make their own decisions and to see what they want to see, connect with what they want to connect with. And I so appreciate that, and I love how you did that without forcing anything down anyone's throats.
We really love that comes across. What I say all the time is that if there was an easy answer to this problem, we would have found it already. And I think we really love the idealism that each of those characters is bringing to it. But when we make decisions about the directions our society should go, we need to be constantly checking in and making sure we're steering the ship.
Yeah, but all of the characters have to have their stake in it and their motivation, and so that's definitely in the goal of trying to write something like this.
And you do it so beautifully, and then everything really comes to life on multiple levels with the animation, it's fantastical. And I love your use of color in the animation, Jane.
I love color.
The use of color and the way that the color vibrancy increases the deeper we get into the story. The individual cryptids, I love the mythological look. Not this 21st century or 20th century CGI kind of manipulation, but going back to ancient paintings, to ancient architecture with carvings. We really get to see some of the true beauty of the griffins and the manticores, the phoenix, things like that, without modern day machinations applied to them. And that is so lovely. But the way you introduce color and how each location has a different color, and as things intensify, the color gets more vibrant. This is it. It's just amazing, Jane. Amazing.
Thank you. That was a deliberate choice, obviously, that I am very, very proud of. As far as a little bit under the hood, each scene is a separate After Effects composition. So in a very real way, each scene is being worked on like it is its own separate short film.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm trying to bring together all of the pieces of that. And in that moment, I'm less concerned about how it's interacting with the things on either side of it. I'm just trying to make that one beautiful space. And then I zoom out and make sure that there is a progression across the whole film, so that we don't stay in one visual look too long. And that I'm glad that it's succeeding and helping propel the film forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's really wonderful. And the Baku, I fell in love with this adorable, innocent little Baku. And the way you animated him, it's with bubbles almost coming off of him wherever he goes. Very fanciful, but almost like a Peter Max kind of feel from the pop art of the 60s. And it is just so charming.
There was a little bit of a happy accident with the Baku. I had designed the creature, and it was one of the last ones I painted because it was so important. And I went through the script, and I made a miscalculation about how many angles I needed. And so every time I came to this creature, I kept running into problems with it can't really move around very well. But in the end, that constraint made it this very still, and then it's got the boiling of the swirl underneath it. There's something about it being this incredibly powerful and sought-after creature to be small and cute and still, I think, is a dichotomy that really helps fall in love with that creature.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's because it is so small and cute, and it really brings together the innocence, almost the innocence of a child in determining what's good, what's bad, and that's what the Baku does. The Baku can pick, do I want to suck out bad nightmares or, happy dreams? And it's just like a child growing up. They can go good or they can end up in juvenile hall.
And it's funny because it is cute, and I think it is cute on screen, but if you kind of take it out of context, it's kind of horrifying looking too at the same time. It's got these huge, big eyes with tiny little pupils, and it's a very strange creature.
Mm-hmm. But strange is good. Strange is good in this case. You mentioned something very important, Jane, and that's the pupils, the eyes. The irises are, of all the characters, are in constant motion. And I just think it's fascinating. What was the thought behind that, guys, for having the irises in constant motion on the characters?
Well, it's a trick I pulled from anime. Something that you talk about in animation school is the idea of the boil. Like, if you have a single drawing on the screen, if you have motion and then you stop on a single drawing, it doesn't feel like you've stopped. It feels like you've frozen. And so when we made the choice to go from a looping line to these still drawings and puppetry, there was a real fear that when they weren't moving, they would feel dead. And I have a relatively realistic animation style, and especially like when you're in close to those spaces, you need help bringing to life. It is not going to be, if the movement isn't exaggerated, you need that light, the movements in the eyes, just to connect with that character.
Makes it feel like they have a soul.
Mm-hmm. Very, very much so.
It would have been a lot of staring at empty paintings. I think it would have felt less alive.
Yeah, I love what it does, and it makes you feel like everybody has a soul and has a stake. Every creature, every person, I really like that. A huge part of this, beyond story and animation, is John Carroll Kirby's score. Wow. This score.
Yeah, we're huge fans of the score too. So.
What were your conversations and thought processes like with John in coming up with a score? Because we've got flutes, we've got pan flutes, we've got drums, very organic feels, but then we also get some electronic, a little bit of electronic synth thrown in there. So I'm really curious about what you were looking for musically.
Yeah, I'm not a musical person at all, and I also, we live in Richmond, Virginia, Jane and I, and it makes me feel quite kind of removed from sort of finding a composer. And I knew working on this, I had to find a totally incredible composer. But that's something you haven't heard before. Because if I went to see like an adult animated fantasy film called Cryptozoo, it would have to have the coolest score in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one of the main, almost half the movie, literally, is for like entertainment and kind of delivering on what you're promising people.
When you're thinking about, these kind of iconic big animations that cross that line, you think like Cera, which has a really unique score that adds so much to the film. And so that was the aspiration.
Yeah. So another filmmaker here is named Rick Alverson, and I was kind of telling him that I didn't know what to do. And Rick got me in touch with the label Jag Jaguar, and I just told Jag Jaguar about Cryptozoo over the phone. And they recommended this guy, John Carroll Kirby, who I'd never heard of before. And I went and met him and told him about Cryptozoo, and he had never scored a film before, and I loved his album Travel. It was kind of one of his early albums. And he seemed kind of not so interested in scoring an animated film. He had like a cool life of touring and traveling with bands. And then years later, when Cryptozoo was finally ready for him, he was even more well-known and was going to tour even more. But then the pandemic struck.
Mm-hmm.
He was stuck at home and quarantine, and so we got him. He was trapped. He had nowhere else to go. And our conversations, honestly, like what Jane said about Akira, that score is not what you would think. If you watched Akira without the sound on, you would not think of it having that score. Mm-hmm. Something magical happened where that particular, instrumentation paired with this drawing created a third thing. So again, me not being musically articulate, it was about trying to find some like magical third thing created by John and us.
It really helped that we felt that earlier album was so spot on to the feeling we wanted to evoke, and so it was really just about, John, please, you do you, and we're going to be such a fan of what you give us.
Yeah, I mean, there's this undeniable power that comes from a meld of music and animation, and you really see, and more importantly, feel that here with Cryptozoo, and it's just spectacular. So now it's taken you a long. It's animation's a long journey anyway. Something this detailed, this involved, I'm sure took longer than most animated films. So now that it's just about to be unleashed to the world, what have each of you taken away from this experience of bringing Cryptozoo to life that you can now take forward in your own lives or your lives as filmmakers?
Organization is everything.
It's a technical answer.
It is. Nothing like this happens without a spreadsheet somewhere.
Yeah, Jane had a crash course, I think, in organizing something
And
at this scale.
producing something at this scale, and human management, and it was really frightening at the beginning of the film because we tried to organize it the same way we did high school thinking, and it was such a more ambitious project. And I was drowning in sticky notes on my desk, and I had a baby, and I was going to murder my husband. It was terrible. But I found spreadsheets. They saved the project and my marriage.
I think for me, the not to get too cheesy, this is kind of what everyone says, but it ends up kind of being about the people that work on the movie, and the years that you spend working on it. It's like a growth of human relationships and kind of learning to communicate, getting better at these kind of social skills, and kind of articulating. Because often, especially with the kind of art that I like, it's quite hard to articulate why something is working. Often it's a bit abstract. So something in there, I think, is what I got away from this.
One last question for both of you. What is it about animation that speaks to you, that has, no pun intended, drawn you to animation?
I have loved to draw and paint and make things and solve puzzles my entire life. And animation is the perfect mix of constraint and freedom for me. This is, again, me and my technical answers, but if I draw a single drawing, I can get so caught up on the details that it becomes precious and fussy. But there's so much to be done in animation that it allows me to loosen up. And I think that for me, that it's a combination of mediums that allows me to say the things I want to say.
Yeah, it's so often when I watch any movie or read any book, I'm thinking one of my criteria is how imaginative is this? What is the force of this person's imagination? And I want it to be powerful. I think animation allows for a huge imagination, and imagination, is the root of everything, and everything kind of has to start as a dream before it makes its way into reality. So I really see animation as the perfect place to let imagination run wild.
Well, the two of you definitely let imagination run wild with Cryptozoo, and to wonderful result. I have to watch it again. It is just so stunning. And don't think for a minute there, Jane, I did not notice in the first part of the film that you had Matt naked in the woods, but for wearing socks.
Yes.
He has to slip on that rock, so he's got to be wearing those tube socks.
Theoretically that, but also I just think it's really funny.
I saw the little lines.
There would be days where I was like, this dreaded Matt, and he's wearing tube socks. Yeah. It made me look.
Socks on naked guys having sex has always been such a bone of contention and fuel for fodder of laughter in television and film. To see it in animation here, I busted up laughing the minute I saw it.
Totally. I used to have very strong, too much information. I will not with anyone wearing socks. I refuse.
It's impossible. It's impossible. You can't.
It is. It's ridiculous.
You can't, because you just start laughing the minute you see the socks, especially tube socks. I mean, tube socks are worse than Argyles.
History in pornography, too, where it was very much, I think in early pornography, almost exclusively, like, there was some taboo that the man needed to be more dressed than the woman. And I don't know where I got that piece of information, so it may not be true, but I feel like I read it 15 years ago somewhere, and it's stuck with me.
Well, it is a lovely touch that I totally appreciated and understood. So, oh, guys, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I can't wait to see what you bring us next. I know it'll be a while, but I cannot wait.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.